My next guest is actually one of those Democrats reaching out beyond their own districts to speak to the very voters Republicans are trying to run away from. Look at the turnout last night in the small town of Belmont, Wisconsin. That is where Congressman Mark Pocan hosted a town hall with voters. And despite the town only having just over 1,000 residents, hundreds turned out. Some of them waiting outside, others watching through windows to hear Pocan's remarks. He did formally invite Republican Congressman Van Orden, whose district actually borders the town of Belmont. I'm sure you know what he did. He declined the invitation. Democratic Congressman Mark Pocan of Wisconsin joins me now. Congressman, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming back on the show. Let's start with this packed town hall that you had last night. What did you hear from the voters? Tell us a little bit about that event.
Well, thanks for having me, Eamon. I also was with Bernie in Kenosha in the 1st Congressional District on Friday night, and then I was at the very edge of my district yesterday morning, and we invited Derek Van Orden, who represents Wisconsin's 3rd Congressional District. He was a no-show, like he's pretty much been since he's been in Congress. But people are pissed. They're very concerned about cuts to Medicaid in particular. They're worried about cuts that are going to happen through the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. They're worried about what could happen if you take away subsidies on the Affordable Care Act. They're worried, many of these people are in a very rural part of Wisconsin, about farm grants and the lack of food going to USAID that comes from places like my district. And they just want to be heard. So I bet you a third of the crowd came from Derek Van Orden's district. Some people drove 2 hours from La Crosse just to come and be heard. And you shouldn't have to drive 2 hours to be heard by your member of Congress. They should just get out from whatever rock they're hiding under and talk to their constituents.
So just to set the record straight, how many of those people do you think were paid protesters that were there last night? Do you have any evidence that anyone there was incentivized to be there other than for simply being a constituent who cares about what is happening to their country and their state?
Yeah, I did not see any limousines with George Soros's name on them, dropping people off. We filled the streets with people. And it was interesting. They came from La Crosse and Potosi and Toma and Platteville, all parts, by the way, not of my district, but of Derek Van Orden's, plus people from that area in my district, the western part of my district. Again, a lot of people who are, very much based in the agricultural economy. This is going to hurt them a lot. At the State of the Union, I brought a farmer who's lost 2 of his grants, even though Donald Trump has said no farmers lost grants. He's living proof that Donald Trump is a liar. And he also is on Medicaid, his family, just to get by, because farming, especially small farms, is not all that lucrative, but you're helping feed your neighbors. So people were just, rightfully so, very concerned. And they just want to make sure that we're doing more. I think that was one of the strongest messages. They want Democrats to do exactly what we're doing right now, and I know some other members are doing, is getting into their districts and make them uncomfortable because they want to be heard and their members won't listen to it.
As you mentioned, you spoke as well with Bernie Sanders at that Fight Oligarchy rally in Kenosha, Wisconsin on Friday. Just tell me about, do you see this as a beginning of a movement? What is it about what you have been able to do, Senator Sanders have been able to do, that is galvanizing people or connecting with people, reaching people? How do you explain that? Why is that happening with you but not with other members of your caucus and Democrats?
So, there's a bumper sticker I had printed once for my campaign that said, if the people lead, eventually the leaders will follow. The people are leading. Now it's our job to start following and doing what we need to do to help have some accountability out of these Republican members. We're getting record calls and emails in our office. I hit my all-day record. I hit my week record. And every member I talk to is having the same thing happen. So we simply have to rise to that occasion. I think the best way to do this is you go and make those Republicans uncomfortable. If what they're doing is so good, why wouldn't they want to go on the rooftop and scream about it, right? Instead, they're hiding in a hole. That alone tells you everything, that they don't want to talk to their constituents. So I'm going to make it that they're uneasy. If they're going to cut Medicaid from 1 out of 3 kids in Wisconsin who gets their health care from that, 55% of seniors who are in nursing homes, like my mom was at the end of her life on Medicaid, 45% of adults with disabilities living independently. Just in Wisconsin, those numbers, those are the people impacted, 1.3 million people. And if you're a member of Congress, you better listen to your constituents, because they can either see if you're continuing to be elected or if you're fired, and they can do that in the election.
Let me ask you about your counterpart on the other side of that border there, Derek Van Orden, the Republican congressman whose district neighbor is Belmont. You said he was invited last night to the event. He declined, but I do want to play for you what he said on a podcast about these town hall protesters. Take a listen.
people associated with the communist movement and the National Socialism movement used to get their way politically is they would do stuff like this, and they were called agitators.
He is basically calling constituents agitators, but then associating them, for those who care and are speaking up and protesting and letting their voice be heard in these town halls, he's basically associating them with the Communist Party.
Yeah, I'll tell you, when someone comes up to you crying because their child has a disability and they can only get by because they have Medicaid, that is such an arrogant, ignorant, and word I can't say on your program comment from a member of Congress to say about their own constituents. I mean, it's just so utterly ridiculous. But too many members of Congress think they're better than their constituents. Clearly, that kind of response comes from someone who thinks he's just better than the people who ultimately he's supposed to represent.
Let's switch gears for a moment and talk about what is actually happening to the federal government. Republicans can try to avoid voters all they want, but these cuts that we're seeing from Trump and Doge and Musk, they are having devastating impact on workers. NBC News has spoken with 20 federal employees across several agencies, many of whom are veterans, saying they've been dealing with suicidal ideations, rapid weight loss, prolonged lack of sleep, panic attacks, and visiting the emergency room after mental breakdowns. And sadly, this was pretty predictable. I mean, when people lose their livelihoods and their lives, more or less, it's unnecessary, but we are seeing people being destroyed in real time.
These are the real life ramifications of what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing. When I went to a town hall in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, that was in, again, Derek Van Orden's district, and he didn't show up and he was invited, but I went. And at the very end of 90 minutes of listening to about 75 farmers who all had stories like Emmett Fisher, the farmer that I brought to the State of the Union, about funds that were frozen and problems over Medicare and other grants that were frozen. At the very end, they told about someone who works for one of the agencies that works with farmers in that part of the state, and that they were one of the casualties of Elon Musk's firing. And when that person went home that night, they took their life. That's the real life ramifications. And for Derek Van Orden or for any Republican to ignore their constituents at a time, this is the real life effects of what's happening. You don't deserve to be in office. And that's why people have to be heard loud. This is a vote that's likely going to happen in April. The president said he wanted to do it in the first 100 days. We've got like 30 to 45 days to do our best to stop these cuts, and it's going to take everyone contacting their members of Congress to do so.
Let me finally get your thoughts on the budget here and what Democrats can do. Obviously, that government shutdown, the looming government shutdown, is kind of barreling ahead. What is the right thing to do? What should Democrats be doing in a moment like this? And how do you message around the decisions that you make?
Yeah, I mean, so it looks like, from what I'm understanding, the Republicans will pass what's called a year-long CR, continuing resolution, that'll fund government through September 30th. But by doing that, one of the secrets that I'm understanding out of this process, so that means you don't have directives directly from Congress, which makes it a little easier for Elon Musk and Donald Trump to keep doing what they're doing and stealing funds from the middle class and those aspiring to be in the middle class and putting them towards that $4.5 trillion for a tax break for Donald Trump and Elon Musk. So this is just a setup to continue to take programs away from the middle class and to fund a giant tax cut. So I hope Democrats do not look at this as something, often we're the responsible ones, want to keep the government open. Yeah. We're not in charge, the Republicans are, but this bill is anything but responsible.
All right, Congressman Mark Pocan, always a pleasure. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Next up, the very latest stop on Donald Trump's retribution tour. We'll tell you about that.